All right, let's go ahead and get started. So first, thanks to everyone who decided to spend their last session of the day with us talking about analytics rather than heading to the bar early. I'm going to question your priorities a little bit, but we appreciate it nonetheless. So a little bit about us. So my name's Ryan McClure. I'm a lead architect with the customer success team. My background is in consulting. I'm based out of Chicago. I've been with Citrix 8+ years now. So my job is essentially to make sure that customers are realizing value out of their investments, which is kind of why I'm here to talk about analytics specifically, because I feel like it's a really important and high value, low challenge level feature that customers can take advantage of to do just that with their investment without having to do something like, overhaul how you're delivering virtual apps and desktops that maybe is a little bit more complex for you to execute, right? So some other interesting facts about me. I'm a UMiami grad. I like college football a lot, so I am often disappointed in the outcome of Miami's football games, and probably the only thing more disappointing than that is my golf game, but I try my best.
Awesome, and I'm Anna Ruiz. I'm a technical marketing architect. If you were here yesterday, I already did the first one of these. Also a UMiami grad, so go Canes. You know it's gonna be a good session if we're both Hurricanes delivering this presentation. Prior to that, I used to be a sales engineer. I actually see some of my customers, old customers here, so shout out. Live in Dallas with my husband and my one-year-old daughter, so my status quo is now always tired, so don't take it personally.
So before we get into the meat of the content, we wanted to kind of get a feel for where everyone is in their journey. So by show of hands, how many folks are actually using in production at least one Citrix Cloud service today? Could be anything. All right, a handful of you have already deployed specifically Workspace, the Workspace service, or are planning to over the course of the next year, let's say. A lot more of you. How many of you feel like in your existing environment, whether it be on-prem or cloud, you have visibility gaps into your Citrix environment? The business comes back to you and says, hey, we got a Citrix problem, you know it's a network problem, but you can't prove it, right? Everybody, shocking. And how many folks have more than one site or farm deployed across their various locations? Okay, almost all of you again. And last but not least, how many folks think that analytics is just a buzzword? All right, so hopefully we're going to dispel the last one and explain the way that analytics can help solve some of these other challenges for you and potentially be the first one of those Citrix Cloud services that you can adopt to start realizing value out of that investment. Anna?
Alrighty, so if you were here for our previous section, we talked about SD-WAN and HDX optimization. Were any of you guys here for session 9? All right, for those of you that weren't, all of the Geek Skype sessions have been recorded. So if you didn't attend, I encourage you guys to go back and look at that. Some great content over the past 2 days. But like Ryan mentioned, today we're gonna focus on analytics. We're gonna talk about machine learning, how we can secure your environment better, and also from a performance perspective, we had a big announcement I guess 2 days ago now at Keynote around performance analytics and how you guys can utilize it today. So where are we in our workspace build? We already talked about apps and desktops. We talked about SaaS and web and how you can integrate that into your Citrix Workspace. We talked about content, right? If you don't have content following you everywhere, your apps are pretty useless, in my opinion. We talked about endpoint management. How can you secure the endpoints for which your users are accessing your workspace? We talked about having a unified app catalog, right? So that your users get that consistent user experience no matter where they're accessing their workspace from. We talked about securing your environment through your network. We talked about that consistent user experience, but we have a really big gap here. And that's where analytics comes in, right? Through analytics, we want to give you the visibility into your environment, not only to secure it proactively, but also to give your users the best user experience possible. So before they pick up the phone and complain and say, hey, my Citrix is broken, my Citrix is slow, my Citrix doesn't work, which I'm sure we have all heard in the past, can we give you guys the tools and visibility into your environment in order to prevent that and proactively fix or optimize your environment? So If you guys don't know what this is Citrix Workspace. And it allows your end users to access your apps, desktops, and files no matter where they are. It allows you to have a workspace that is device independent, so I'm no longer tied to a specific endpoint in order to be productive. I can be productive on the go. And so throughout these 9 sessions, we have built this workspace for you. We have dove deep into the different sections and different topics that make up the workspace. So again, if you weren't able to attend in these past 2 days, I encourage you guys to check back and look at all of the recordings. With analytics, we're going to talk about securing it, right? So again, how can we secure your environment? How can we make sure that as your users are going from device to device, your intellectual property remains secure? And again, how can we ensure that your end users have the best experience possible? And so this is where analytics fits in, right? Citrix Analytics talks to all the different services that make up the workspace in order to give you the visibility that you need as administrators to make your environment great. And so Ryan, why don't you go through, I know you work with a lot of really large customers, why is analytics important? Why should these folks care about analytics? And what is analytics to begin with?
Sure. I guess the easiest way to go through it is kind of piece by piece, right? So the piece that I think everyone is most familiar with because it's been out the longest is the security analytics piece. So I'm sure over the course of the last 18 to 24 months, all of your organizations have started to increase focus on security if it wasn't already top of mind for you before. But when you look at some of the trends in terms of breaches that occur over the course of time, you can see that, yeah, human error is a big chunk, but then we've got a quarter that's phishing, another almost quarter that's ransomware, lost devices are 20%. There's no one culprit every time. So how can we help automate the analysis of this nearly 200,000 events that most customers are seeing on average rather than requiring human intervention every time, start to generate some trends on what normal looks like versus what's an anomaly, and then start to respond to these in an automated fashion. And one of the other things I hear a lot is, hey, a big portion of the user base that accesses my Citrix environment today, they're internal. They're not the threat to my organization, right? The threat to my organization is external. Well, that's becoming, I think, as big a misconception now as ever in the industry. So 28%, starting to venture from a quarter to a third of breaches over the course of 2018 were perpetrated by internal actors. These are people that already have access to your network and some legitimate business purpose for being there. So analytics is just another tool in our toolbox. It's not uniquely targeted to internal users, but helps us gain visibility into that user community that is a real threat. So once we have an understanding of the security implications of a user interacting with our environment, we also want to know that security and user experience can't always be at odds. They can't always be polar opposites. So what's their experience look like? How is their interaction with the workspace performing? And that's really what performance analytics is all about. So you see a list of tools up here. These are certainly not the only ones out there, but they're some of the most common ones that we see our large enterprises deploying to gain visibility into some specific part of their environment that they had a gap into before. The challenge can be that these are distributed tools, and you don't necessarily even know where to look when you have an issue occur or know where to start. So that's one of the things that performance analytics can do, is help aggregate that data into a single view, give you an understanding of, do I have a logon time speed issue when my users say that Citrix is broken or Citrix is slow? Do I have a network latency issue? Where do I even begin, right? And the other thing, for those of you that raised your hand about having multiple sites and farms, is whether you're using Director or some other tool, most of those give you single site or single farm views of your environment today. You have to go back and forth between consoles or drop-down tabs. It can be kind of painful to dig up what you're looking for. So performance analytics is going to give you that visibility across multiple sites, unlike Director on-prem today, right? So they're all going to aggregate into a single view. You can look at them in aggregate, or you can look at them individually. And then last but not least is operations analytics. So it's great to understand how we can further secure our environment, how it's performing, but then we also need to know what our users are doing. What applications are they using? What websites are they going to? How much bandwidth are they consuming? Those sorts of things. So when we look at this architecturally, kind of left to right here, you're starting with the user interacting with a device, and ultimately they're interacting with one of the data sources, right? So those data sources are our cloud services. Those cloud services then feed logs in various forms into the analytics database, and analytics interacts with those to establish trends and determine outcomes. Some of these are administrator configured, others will be generated based on trends, machine learning algorithms, and the like, right? So when we talk about data retention, I think that's another thing that commonly comes up as a question when we talk about analytics. What data is obtained and how long is it stored? So all of these data sources are off by default, and you go explicitly enable them. So you have total control over what data is being gathered from what services, and by default it'll be retained for a period of 13 months. So again, as we discussed, those logs are then transmitted to that database, and the key part here is that we're then taking action on that information rather than just collecting information and doing nothing with it. So supported data sources, you can see that a good number of these are services, but we also have the ability to gather data from some on-prem deployments for customers that are in that hybrid scenario, which is where a lot of our customer base is today. So we can gather information from an on-prem gateway, we can gather information from an on-prem virtual app and desktop site. So some of you have probably had that conversation and say, wait a minute, there's a catch there. I need to be using Workspace to get security analytics off of my on-prem virtual app and desktop site. And that's where there's an exciting announcement that we're working towards, right? That as part of performance analytics in an upcoming version of Virtual App and Desktop Service, you'll be able to upgrade to that version, establish a 443 outbound connection from your delivery controllers and director, and you won't have to leverage Workspace to get that performance analytics data. So a real solution for those customers that are truly on-prem virtual app and desktop sites today. Maybe you can't get to Workspace because there's a certain capability around authentication that you're working for, but you really want to start taking advantage of analytics to gain some additional visibility. This is your path to do it. And obviously, if you're already a virtual app and desktop cloud service or Workspace Premium, it's a pretty simple process that Anna's going to walk us through and show us how it looks.
Awesome, thanks Ryan. So how do we go ahead and get started, right? I'm sure all of you guys are like, this sounds awesome, but how do I get it in my environment? So the first thing is, for security analytics, you do need a Citrix Cloud account. So if you don't have one, go to Citrix Cloud and get your account. And then like Ryan mentioned, it will actually do a discovery of all the services that you already have within your workspace. This is exclusive for security analytics, and you're going to go on and turn it exclusively, that data processing on, right? We don't turn it on by default. We want you to decide which data we capture for you and which data you want to be a part of your analytics service. All of this I'm going to go through a demo to actually show you step by step of what that looks like. For your on-prem virtual apps and desktops, if you want security analytics enabled, again, you would have to integrate it into Citrix Workspace. And once you do this, so that you could take those actions that we're going to talk about, you're going to have to install an agent on your delivery controller. And again, I'm going to quickly go through these screenshots, but then we're going to go through a full-on demo of me actually stepping through the configurations. So the first things first, you'll see that the configuration is incomplete. It's going to prompt me to configure an agent. Once I download the agent, you'll see in the demo that it's a next, finish, very easy. It will ask me for credentials for that specific delivery controller. Then it'll ask me to enter the director URL, so the URL that you use today to access director on-prem. And once I do that, I completed the configuration. So it really is very simple to get started, especially if you're already a Workspace customer and are utilizing some of our services or are looking at moving into Workspace. This is a tool that we highly recommend you look into. Like we talked about, for performance analytics, we made a really awesome announcement that you don't even need to be on Workspace today. You could utilize it by just being a full on-prem customer. So like Ryan mentioned, for performance analytics specifically, you won't even have to be on Workspace in order to start taking advantage of performance analytics.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that I've heard a couple times there from customers is, well, what if I'm an LTSR shop, right? That was a CR build. So this is something that's being evaluated for consideration in an upcoming LTSR.
Yep, exactly. So let's go ahead and see how to get started. So if you're familiar with the Citrix Cloud Console, Citrix Analytics is a Citrix Cloud service. So you would go into the Cloud Console, go into Analytics. One of the cool things that I think just across our cloud platform is we're really good at describing what we're doing and giving you videos and steps of how to do it. So you'll notice the first time I log on, it'll say like, welcome to Citrix Analytics. You can view a demo or just go ahead and get started. So for now, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you notice, I know it's a little bit hard, but in the upper right-hand corner, it's going to start discovering those data sources. So again, any Citrix services that you already have integrated into Workspace, it will automatically discover them. You will have to go and explicitly enable the data processing because, again, we don't want to make those decisions for you. So we want to make sure that you decide which data we're processing. For the virtual apps and desktops, you'll notice that it has a little yellow triangle saying that the configuration is incomplete. Just because, as I mentioned, for the on-premise virtual apps and desktops, we do need to have an agent installed in order to be able to take actions once you set up some of those rules. And so we're going to go ahead, go into the configuration incomplete, and install and configure the agent. I am logged into the delivery controller, so I wouldn't be switching back and forth. So I'm downloading the agent to the delivery controller for my on-prem site. So once I do that, it's a pretty easy next, finish. And once I finish that, I'll be able to connect to that installed agent. So it'll give me that option of now connecting to the agent that I just installed on my delivery controller. We do recommend for high availability. In this demo, I only show it for one delivery controller, but we would recommend you repeating this process on other delivery controllers for HA purposes. So now we're going to type in our credentials to connect to the delivery controller. So this would be the service account for your delivery controller or administrative account that you utilize for that delivery controller. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my credentials. I think I forgot to type in my username, so I went back and did that. So I'll go ahead and hit next. And once I do that, it will verify my credentials, and it'll ask me, just like I showed in the screenshots, to provide the directory URL that in order to get some of that information. So I'll go ahead and real quick type in the directory URL. And once I do that, I'll be able to review my configuration and save that configuration. And again, you would repeat this process across your delivery controllers just so that you have that high availability. One thing to note, Ryan talked about the data retention. We keep that for 13 months. In the same pane, you could go and turn off the data retention, but the data that we already captured, we are retaining that for the 13 months. So just because you go and turn it off doesn't mean that we're going to go and flush all that data that we've already captured. So something for you guys to keep in mind. And that's it. It's as easy as that for security analytics. So you go, you turn on the data processing, and then you install an agent. Pretty easy, right? I could do it, so I think it's pretty easy. Awesome. So we're now going to break it down between security, performance, and operations. So Ryan is going to get us started on the security piece.
Sure. So this diagram probably doesn't look unfamiliar to many of you. Starting from sort of left to right, we've got our data sources feeding into the analytics engine. Those data sources are essentially broken down logically by access, content, apps, and network. Those data sources are then run through the analytics machine learning processing model, in addition to the administrator configurations, like manually saying that, hey, if they do this, they should be added to a watch list or what have you. And ultimately, it results in a red, amber, green view of the user's risk score. So the higher the number, the higher risk the user. The lower the number, the lower risk the user. And it's important to understand that this risk score can go both directions, right? It can elevate, and then as those risky events age out and the user's behavior starts to change, they can dilute back out and that number can come back down. So how the risk score works, again, everything starts with the data sources and the information that we're collecting, but we already talked about sort of the AI element of it. There are also administrator configured policies, user behavior, so establishing a baseline for what that user typically does, and then depending on some of the other pieces of the solution that we may choose to enable, like Active Directory integration, we may also have the ability to build information about this user's peer group and normalize them against the behavior that their peers are conducting. So that combination is ultimately what results in those high, medium, and low scores. High is anything 91 to 100, medium that's 71 to 90 range, and low is below 70. So the policy configurations are all if-then statements. So if we look at some examples here, should we build out the slide? Some of the common ones, like we'll demo in a minute. If the user attempts to access a blacklisted URL, let's add them to a watch list so that we know they did that. We don't necessarily have to go and kick the user out or do something that's really invasive to their ability to work, but we should at least know that that was happening, right? And I think that that's a common theme here when you look at the stuff on the right, is they're not all hard actions. So when I talked earlier about the balance between user experience and security, if, for example, someone is downloading files excessively and I decide to go and expire all of their share file links because I think they might be trying to exfiltrate data from my organization, the worst case scenario there is it was a valid business case and they have to go recreate the link when the recipient says, hey, this link says it's invalid. We haven't stopped them from working, blocked access, restricted login, or anything like that. So there's that balance between what we're doing in response to the user's behavior and the impact to the business. So a quick demo here on how these rules work. So starting out in the analytics console from an administrator's perspective, got to start the demo. That's the first step. We'll go up into the policies configuration under settings and we'll create a new policy. So the condition we're going to select here is that if the user attempts to access a blacklisted URL, then as we discussed earlier, we want to make sure that we're going to go ahead and add them to that watch list so that we can go and talk to their manager or whatever we decide to do with that information. So we did have to explicitly enable it at the bottom there. That's something I've done incorrectly a few times myself. So then if we hop over to access control, this is where you're actually configuring those blacklisted and whitelisted URLs. So you can either go and manually specify them as we've done here. We've also got categories that are available. You can kind of see at the bottom of the screen. So you can say, hey, if they go to any of these websites that fall into these categories that are predefined, those should also be blacklisted. So take some of the manual configuration away. Now, if we jump over to the user's perspective, we're going to go ahead and launch a browser. This browser is going to launch in the Citrix Secure Browser service. So that's a Linux-based VDA that runs in a cloud service that Citrix is hosting for you. The other nice thing here is this user just needs a web browser. I'm sure many of you have applications that are just web apps. You're publishing IE and consuming an RDS cal to do that. In this model, you don't have to consume that RDS cal. So there's a real cost savings to the business there. So, as the user goes and browses to Yahoo, which for whatever reason our business has decided is super dangerous, you can see that they get blocked and they're not able to get there. So let's jump back over to the admin view here and take a look at what that changed. So you can see already there in the first view that there was a plus 40 on this user's risk score. If we know who we're looking for, we can just go dive into the user view, right? And once it loads up for us, we can see that, hey, aside from what we did, analytics thought that that wasn't normal, to borrow from the title of the session, and added to their risk score. But we also explicitly, as an administrator, said, hey, let's put them on a watch list. So both of those popped up. But you're not always going to know which users are doing bad things. So there's also a watch list view where you can just go jump into that watch list, see who got added, and go back historically over the period of a day, a week, a month to see who falls into this category and if there's a trend starting to build where they're a real risk to your organization. And if you don't know what you're looking for altogether, we also have the ability to search, and you can search based on those data categories that we talked about before. So things like access, content, virtual apps and desktops, and you'll see all that information appear right there in the console for you based on your search criteria.
And here you would get specifically exactly what security analytics is getting, right? So if you're curious as to see what we're capturing in that search model, you would be able to see all the details of what we're capturing for that specific user.
Good point. So if someone even wants to do something as simple as like a sanity check on, hey, what data is being gathered? Are we gathering any information about our users that we want to handle in a different way? It's a good way to sanity check it. So third-party integrations. The first one we'll talk about is Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph integration. So how many folks are either using Azure AD, ID protection, or Windows Advanced Threat Protection as part of their environment today? Any? You got one in the back, a couple in the way back, and one up here. So 3 or 4 of you. So this is a pretty cool integration point, to the point where we can take a look at the IP the user's coming in from, and did they move in some manner that's impossible. You know, they were on the west coast of the US, and then all of a sudden they're in, you know, Asia or somewhere, and that happened in the course of an hour. We can establish if the user is accessing from a machine that has malware or ransomware installed on it, and we can then adjust their risk score based on that information. So pretty cool integration with a quote-unquote non-Citrix data source to help us be a little bit more intelligent about that risk score. But this is the one that I think comes up most often when I talk to customers is, hey, all of this is cool, but like, I'm not the security center in my IT organization. I am a data source for the security center in my IT organization. So I love having this view of my user base and being able to be proactive with my security team, but I also got to get them this data in some centralized fashion. And Splunk is one of the most common centralized SIEM services that we see out there. So you can take all this valuable data that we're gathering and pipe it out to Splunk so that your security team can process it in whatever manner they see fit. And last but not least is Active Directory as a data source. So this one's a little bit of a consideration from a PII perspective, personally identifiable information in terms of what we're gathering about our end users. But what this allows us to do is help build a more intelligent job profile about the end user, right? So that we know things about their organization, their office location, and who else is in their organization. So when we're trying to make those mappings between them and what other users like them do, we have a little bit more information to do that with. And again, this can be explicitly enabled or disabled. So Anna, you want to talk a little bit about performance and analytics for us?
Sure. So who here was at the opening keynote a couple of days ago? Alrighty. So you all heard the big announcement about performance analytics. It's something that I know I'm very excited about. We've been hearing it internally. And so let me build out this slide super quick so that we don't have all of these animations coming.
You were in animation mode when you built this, huh?
I know I was. I was in full-on caffeinated animation mode. Anyway, so the user will go into their workspace. The original version of performance analytics that we'll kick off with will be specifically for virtual apps and desktops. But talking to our product managers, I know that we're looking to expand that, just like with security analytics, to have other data sources so that you get that information for. So you'll be able to do this for your on-premises environment as well. As we mentioned earlier, you won't even need to be on Workspace for your on-premise environment in order to consume performance analytics. And you're going to get comprehensive data not only coming from the Workspace app, also HDX Insight, Gateway, as well as infrastructure. So giving you a lot of insight into your environment, and that you can proactively act upon that insight and be able to give your users the best experience possible, and also take advantage and make sure that you're using your infrastructure wisely. And I think the coolest thing is that we had a lot of people in the room who mentioned that they had multiple sites in their environment today. So like Ryan mentioned earlier, I think one of the biggest challenges with our customers is that, you know, Director is great and you get awesome information, but you need to go in and look at it individually per site. You don't have that overall view, and performance analytics will now give you that overall view of your environment, where if you want to look across your multiple sites, you will be able to get that.
Yeah, I hear that enhancement request for Director at 1 out of every 2 customers I go to, I feel like, so that's definitely a huge asset.
Yep, so some of the things that you'll be able to see is like your user sessions, so how many users are accessing your environment. You'll be able to filter this across your entire sites, or if you want to just look at a specific site like you would in Director, you still have that ability to do so. I know sometimes it is important to just look at a specific site and not your entire environment, so you will be given that flexibility. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to actually be rating those experiences for you so that you can see who is having an excellent experience, who is having a fair experience, and a poor experience. And as you'll see in the demo, we're actually going to give you an end user experience score that's going to have many factors that go into it. And then from there, you'll be able to proactively take actions in order to hopefully get the majority of your users in that excellent experience bucket. And then from an infrastructure perspective, we're also going to give you visibility into your infrastructure availability to make sure that you're utilizing that effectively. So are your VDAs healthy? Are they being overutilized? Are they being underutilized? And we'll give you the tool so that if you need to go to upper management, you now have all this data and information. I know a lot of times when I was working with customers, that was their biggest complaint is we know what we need, but we need data in order to go to upper management who's a little bit more removed and show them, right? And now with performance analytics, we're giving you those tools and empowering you to have that information readily available. And so how does the user experience work, right? Very similar to the performance analytics user experience. We'll be going in and taking different metrics, right? We're taking a different perspective from the security piece. We're looking more at the performance. So we're looking at latency, logon duration, failures, reconnection, and taking all of that and giving you a user experience score that you'll be able to dive deeper into to see what your users are experiencing. And again, proactively be able to take actions on your environment before they come and complain that Citrix is broken or slow. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if we look all the way on the right-hand side, you'll see the user experience score factors. You'll actually be able to drill down even deeper. So like the ICA round trip time, logon durations, failure, VDA load, CPU, and memory. And again, we're going to rate those between excellent, fair, and poor. So you can see this for all your sites, but also drill down. Maybe there's a specific site that's really, having a poor user experience, and you need to focus on that site in order to improve their experience as well. You'll be able to look at it historically as well. So just like in Director, you will have that historical view at your environment. You'll be able to look at your user sessions, right? How many users are connecting across my environment? You'll be able to look at your round trip time, right? So all this information, a lot of this information is already in Director, but now we're giving you not only the tools to view it across sites, but we're also rating this for you so to make it easier to consume and to be able to improve your environment, which I think is huge and something that a lot of customers can take advantage of.
Yeah. And if you don't have your magnifying glasses out, at the bottom of each value there, you can see how it's like how fair or poor is measured, right? So either at milliseconds or seconds or whatever the metric is.
Yep, from an infrastructure perspective, like I showed in the screenshots, we'll be able to look at the VDAs from a server perspective, as well as a desktop perspective. Again, similar to the user experience, you'll be able to nail that down per site. And again, a lot of times you want to see how, actively you're using your infrastructure. Is it being overused, underused, and being able to make accommodations in that regards. Are some of your VDAs under maintenance? Are too many under maintenance at one specific time? Are there VDAs that are unregistered and being unused at the time? So what can we give you guys in order to make your environment the best it can be so that your users aren't calling you all the time saying that their Citrix doesn't work? Alrighty, so from an operations perspective, last but definitely not least, let's build this out. So operations, what it gives you is the ability to view access control and to view the total number of domains that your users are accessing within your network, the data that they're uploading, the data that they're downloading, and give you, again, a very easy view for you to consume this. So this may be a little small, but these slides will be available so that you will have these screenshots. On the left-hand side, you see it based on user operations. So both sides is essentially the same information, just displayed differently, right? So on the left-hand side, we have it per user. So what are my top users per transaction? What are my users that are downloading a lot of data? And then on the right-hand side, we have that per application. So what are the top domains that my users are accessing? Here in this demo environment, they're accessing Facebook a lot. Maybe I should go and block that because they're not being very productive, right? And so it gives you the tools to look at the information and what your users are doing with services that you're already consuming today with Citrix Workspace. So Ryan, why don't you take us home? Let's go through not only what we covered today, but what we've covered in the full Geeks guide.
Sure. I'll start with a little trip down memory lane here. So before we do that, show of hands, did anybody attend all 10 Geeks guides? We have like 3.
That's awesome.
That's great. We were taking bets earlier on what the over-under was. I didn't win. Okay, so we started out with the gateway service talking about ICA proxy and SSO to SaaS and web apps. From there, we layered in sort of that general purpose use case, right? Access control, the ability to control the browser, and the use of SaaS applications, which is a capability that we have in Workspace that's maybe a little different than what you're used to if you're just thinking of Workspace as a direct cloud analog of Storefront. It definitely does more. After that, we talked about securing the endpoint itself. So, securing the back end and the data in the apps is a piece of the puzzle, but if we can't take actions on the device itself, if it's lost or stolen or jailbroken and we don't have that visibility, that can be a gap for us. So that was the next piece of the Workspace that was added, again, still in that single pane of glass view regardless of the platform that we're on. And then last but not least, we added content collaboration. So, it's great if my work follows me everywhere, but the second that someone sends you that email, hey, can you send me the PowerPoint presentation from yesterday, and you're on the go and you don't have that content with you, there's a huge chunk of your work that you can't do. So another critical piece of the Workspace, and also a very different view than what folks are used to if you're just used to the storefront experience. And then, of course, last but not least, the analytics piece, which is what we just spent the last half an hour on. So if you don't know what that piece is yet, you were probably not awake. So again, the ultimate goal here is a single pane of glass experience to the user that allows them to be more productive by bringing all of the different tasks that they're trying to perform in different locations together, and in a manner that allows us to wrap a layer of security around it and then understand what the user's experience quality looks like on the back end when they're interacting with that workspace.
And once you have this full workspace experience, you'll now, after the announcements for Keynote, you'll be able to add the intelligence features that we're bringing in later this year. So not only will you get all this awesome functionality for your end users, now you'll be able to do a lot of that intelligently as well.
Yeah, good point. So, my key takeaways here, if you only remember a few things, I think the first one is that there is value for on-prem customers as well. Analytics is a cloud-based service, but it's not only for customers that are consuming virtual app and desktop service or gateway service or general purpose SaaS. It has value for the on-prem virtual app and desktop customer or Zen app, Zen desktop customer as well. Users don't need to come through Workspace to get performance analytics data. They do for security analytics, but not the performance analytics piece of things. And again, now that we've had these announcements at Synergy, analytics is about more than just security as well. We're also trying to get visibility from an operational perspective and a performance perspective. And then if you can layer on Workspace on top of it, that's when you get the full suite of added features and functionality. So, and I think the last note here, part of what makes analytics a little different than some of the other security tools out there, is that it always doesn't have to be an opposition of security and user experience. As we saw, some of the controls like starting session recording is a pretty soft control from an end user experience perspective. We're not interrupting their ability to work, but we are taking action based on something risky that they did so that we have the ability to go back and look at it in case it becomes a risk to the business. Anything to add, Anna?
No, I think you did a great summary of that.
All right, well then we will give people 6 minutes of bar time back. Please take the time to rate the session, and I know that this is something that I think I saw Martin back there. He's worked really, really hard on. So Tech Zone is chock full of awesome content that's been written by some of the folks in Citrix that do the most interacting with some of our most challenging deployments. There's a lot of great leading practices on there, reference architecture. So if you haven't seen it yet, definitely go check it out. There's a lot of great information in there.
And we do have stickers up front for Citrix Tech Zone in case you forget where to go. We have stickers up here. So if there's any questions, feel free to go to the mics or come up here and we'd be happy to answer those for you. But thanks again for coming. Enjoy happy hour, enjoy the party tonight. And and this is the last session of Synergy and of Geek's Guide. So thank you guys for coming.